Hi everyone, welcome to this session where ZEE5, the largest Indian entertainment destination in association with ET Brand Equity, presents the ZEE5 Intelligence Monitor, a knowledge series that will deep dive into customer behavior towards products and services across diverse categories. Today, in this third episode, we'll focus on the fast growing e-gaming or online gaming sector in this country. As per industry estimates, in 2021, the Indian e-gaming sector had revenues of around rupees 136 billion, and it's expected to grow to a compound annual growth rate of 21% to INR 290 billion in the next 5 years. India is currently the fourth largest online gaming market globally, and the number of Indian online gamers is expected to rise to 510 million in 2022, up to from 360 million in 2020. Experts also believe that the e-gaming industry is growing at a CAGR of over 20% and holds the significant potential for economic growth, job creation, and contribution to the government's vision of a $1 trillion economy by 2025. Additionally, there are over 400 gaming startups in India currently, and all these startups are accelerating the growth of this sector, and this industry is also witnessing a strong current of investments flowing into these players as investors and venture capitalists see a great potential in the Indian market for the near future. Today, in this session, I'm joined by industry stalwarts who will unveil the consumer insights, demographics, trends, challenges, and the growth story that remains to be unfolded on how this country can become a hotbed for e-gaming or online gaming category in the next few years. It's my great honor and privilege to be able to introduce my esteemed panelists today, Mr. Shivanandan Pare, CEO of Gaussian Network Private Limited. Next, Mr. Harish Rawat, Senior Vice President Marketing at Gamescraft. Mr. Vatsal Shah, Head of Digital Marketing at Games 24/7. And we have Mr. Rajiv Bakshi, Chief Operations Officer, Revenue at ZEE5. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us today and helping us and helping our viewers deep dive into the nuances of understanding the consumers of the gaming industry today. So before we start, I really want to come to Rajiv here, and Rajiv, please help us set the context for this entire discussion today, right? So we are discussing about the ZEE5 Intelligence Monitor. Right. So if you can just give us a sneak peek into the objectives and the idea behind this entire monitor, the entire exercise, and why we are talking gaming today.
Sure. So first, very warm welcome to co-panelists. So let me take you a few months back, and I was brainstorming with the team, and we felt that since ZEE5 is the dominant destination when it comes to OTT entertainment, and we have a MAU of 90 million plus, spread across India, metros, non-metros, big cities, small cities, rural places, available in 12 languages. So we have a wide kind of demographic base, and we were doing a lot of kind of data science work. And we felt that, how do I add something incremental to my advertisers? What can I provide to them, which could be perhaps known to them, and some may not be known to them, especially when it comes to latest trends, insights, and what the consumer is trying to do with his time, wallet. And we felt that we should create what we call today is the ZEE5 Intelligence Monitor. ZEE5 Intelligence Monitor is an attempt by us to kind of uncover what we call trends and insights emerging or otherwise almost existing, especially which have come through the last, this period of pandemic and lockdown, and how it's dramatically changed people's lives, especially attitudes towards internet-based technologies and solutions. So we've done multiple studies. First one was for EdTech. Now we're doing gaming. We're going to study e-commerce, social commerce, cryptocurrency, and various other kind of emerging categories, which are kind of growing so fast that there has to be some deep sense as to why consumer is doing what he or she is doing. And here we study consumer as in males, females, parents, elderly, young, children, everybody, because that's the kind of wide dispersion of audience ZEE5 today commands. So this is an attempt to basically share what we call our insights, actionable insight from our point of view to our clients, and thereafter they can take an action where if they want to cater to an audience on ZEE5 which exists today, which is positively predisposed to a category. And obviously we try to take out what we learn from these surveys, which are, I would not just say news breaking, but also path breaking from a point of view of where the country is setting up. And this is our second edition that we are operating today, which is on gaming industry. And like the numbers you kind of read in the beginning, they are large, fast growing, billions do come in very often. Percentage are double digit, if not triple. And we are still in the kind of a baby years of this, right, in India. So in the course of discussion today, we will try to unravel some of the kind of insights, how the consumers today is thinking. Of course, there are three panel experts, so they know what the category is doing in terms of spends, revenue growth, and all of that. Our humble, contribution would be about sharing what we believe ZEE5 audience, which is a fair representation of the country because the way we spread out, is also thinking parallelly.
Great. Thanks, Rajiv. Thanks for setting the context so beautifully here. So I know, as you rightly pointed out, we have experts, and I'll basically come to all my experts today on the panel and basically quiz them about the findings and how they conquer with the findings and what are their experiences when it comes to the specific data sets and specific findings that the report mentions. So I just wanted to open up this discussion and invite all my gaming panelists here. So I'll start with Shivanandan here, right? Shivanandan, there is a interesting finding in the ZEE5 intelligence monitor that mentions that slightly mentions about why this category is Rajiv is so highly speaking about, right? We have almost 60% of the ZEE5 viewers today playing games online, and more than half of the audience play online games almost every day, at least 5 times a week, right? So, Shiva, you have been, basically, driving a company, and you have games across all platforms, say Rummy, poker, and so on and so forth. What's the trend that you see in your company, and your consumers in terms of the daily usage, in terms of the daily engagement that they have with the platform?
Gaussian Networks is the custodian of Adda 52, which is India's largest poker vertical player. And we just recently launched Adda.games, which is our foray into the multi-gaming platform, right? Which has fantasy, rummy, poker, and rest of the guys. It's very casual, but real money games. We are only in real money games. We are 100% subsidiary of Delta Corp, which is India's largest listed player in terms of the casino and real money gaming industry is concerned, right? So I have, I think Rummy or multi-gaming platform, my colleague or my friend here, Harish, who is Harish and Vatsal should be able to share because they're pretty large and pretty big players in that space. So I leave it to them. I would more or less focus on poker as such, right? Now, the way we look at our consumers, everybody looks at it and probably looks at it in this manner, that there is a experimental player who doesn't know anything, but who sees the lure of, probably a titillating ad, or says that, okay, what is this? Let me discover it. And that's one segment of the consumer whom my acquisition team or my marketing team or other platform we would be acquiring, which is experimental. He or she may not know the game as such, but gets excited and gets into the platform. The second set of players they know the game, but they are recreational. The third set, which is regs you call, pros you call, or anybody, these are the guys who are so fascinated or passionate about the game, in our case, poker, and they say they are now here to learn. They have learned the game and they're very confident. They are also in the process learning the game by spending more and more hours, because their ambition is probably slowly tilt towards making out a career out of playing poker itself. Poker as a game ends up like that. Even Rummy has so-called professional or regs who just play 8 to 10 hours a day, either on our platform or anybody's platform or offline, and said this is their bread and butter. This is the job, basically, right? They are the ones who contribute the highest amount of rake, revenue, liquidity, the parameters on which, on the revenue or the commercial metrics on which we get measured. The recreational players end up giving us huge amount of liquidity in terms of players, number of players who occupy the table, right? Now for us, and the first one, which is experimental, that's your recruitment, or that's the mouth of the funnel. So we have seen that increasing during the pandemic to a great extent, but also tapering off, because they come, they experience, they leave off the platform for whatever reason. They either don't like the game, or they feel they don't want to play it, right? So that's, for us, all three become important because they each funnel feeds into the next segment, right? So for us, while acquisition becomes one big game changer there, it is the retention and reactivation which plays a big part in the overall scheme of real money game, right? So for us to handhold the consumer whom we have acquired, to make him mature into the other two segments, is very, very critical. And poker, it becomes extremely special, primarily because it's not a game which can easily be learned or played. It's extremely fast. It is extremely skill based, and the ability to win is purely on the basis of skill.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
So that makes the game a little more tricky for us, and that also is the biggest moat which we so far have from a pure poker vertical perspective, because it's not easy to recruit and easy to retain them, right? That's all. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Shivanandan. It was a great definition of your consumer, and that just said says why you are one of the biggest poker platforms in India. So as you mentioned, I would move to Harish here. Harish, why don't you give us a sneak peek about your consumer here? Right, we're speaking about how the consumers are engaging with your respective platforms, respective games, right? So as Sivarandan rightly directed, why don't you give us a sneak peek into the rummy players that India currently is seeing today?
So Rami, I think my dear friend Vatsal can give a best response here, because he definitely is. Rami is the core to that. But what I'll give you is a sneak peek of what GameZee business and the acquisition and how the users looks like, right? Or rather, Gamescraft at an overall group. So if you see, Gamescraft as an umbrella group has multiple games under it, right? There is a Rummy Culture, there is a GameZee, there is a Pocket 52, and so on. Essentially, each of these brands kind of attract a different set of users. So you essentially have a core Rummy user coming into a brand like Rummy Culture. You have a hardcore poker player basically trying out poker with Pocket 52. And then with GameZee, you have this heterogeneous mix of users who basically are interested not only in fantasy, but they want to kind of extend themselves to maybe Rummy, poker, and a bunch of other games, right? So the user mix for Gamescraft or each of these brands essentially is fairly diverse, fairly heterogeneous, and the market mix also changes, right? In case of Rummy and poker, you're looking like at a niche market, which is predominantly playing up in particular cities or maybe in certain geographic regions. That's where it is. The challenge in these markets are, how do you shape the market? How do you grow them? How do you make a broader set of audience come and adopt, right? Just to quote some numbers, if you see searches for Rummy, is about 4 lakh, 5 lakh on Google. That's what Google Trend shows. Surprisingly, the searches for poker is actually even that high. But when you look at the player mix of both the market, right, Rummy market is almost 10 times the market of poker. And when I was chatting with folks on this internally, I was like, why this? Why would you? So maybe a big set of players are out there on poker who are trying to search for poker just for recreational And that is the bigger use case, because the serious gamers on poker are probably with the core poker players, but there's a bigger set of poker players out there. Similarly, there is a bunch of rummy players who are doing searches, but we are not trying to capture the searches, right? So essentially, there is this mix of users who come from different regions. And then essentially, when you look at this data, what it tells you, there needs to be a right angle to the product mix also. Once the user comes into the funnel, the product needs to solve for, okay, who this user is and what is the solution they are looking for. When we take this and loop it to GameZ, it's altogether a very complex mesh, I would say, because it started off as a fantasy and then it's got into rummy, poker, and so on. And then the things are still evolving there, right? When you look at fantasy, rummy, poker, what we realized was each of these users are very different. There is some overlap between this, but essentially, if you're looking to make money out of these users, and you say, okay, I will acquire for one game, that will flow into other game, I don't think there would be a very bright future there. So essentially, when you're thinking for building your businesses around game, acquisition needs to be individually for each of these. And then you'll have to think about, how do I acquire a fantasy player, which is core? How do I acquire a rummy player? How do I acquire a poker player, and so on, right? Fantasy, essentially, when we started off, we had a huge challenge. We were a late entrant in the market, and the route which we followed was more of disruption. We said that, okay, market is with one mix, which is basically a full game, full innings kind of a fantasy, and we disrupted the market by introducing a second inning and live fantasy. That brought in a lot of interest to users, and they came to GameZ and they started playing that. With Rummy, essentially, there is big challenge that we have our dear friends like Vatsal doing a very competitive positioning there. We have Rummy Culture, a brand which is in-house, which is like, equally strong there, right? So essentially, the market on Rummy also needs to be disrupted. We are trying to figure out what the user essentially like on the Rummy. But what we know is fraud is a big angle in this market. Fraud is a big angle to be solved for in markets, in games like poker. Especially talking from real money gaming perspective, a user who comes and plays, let it be fantasy, poker, etc., they are fairly concerned about frauds. So how a brand or what the brand is doing to resolve those, right? They are fairly concerned about trust factors. Okay, if I come and deposit money, and how will I get my money back? These small things make a big difference in terms of the user experience, and they are great in terms of trust builders, right? Getting these right essentially ensures a slightly better retention in this category. And then that is where the play is. And I think Shiva already talked about how do you funnel a user, give them an optimal experience, which is a great high for first time, and then funnel the user essentially into an optimal mix where he can kind of bring revenues and be retained, right? There needs to be a product loop which basically needs to ensure that the first experience translates into a first purchase translates into, let's say, a second purchase, and so on. And essentially, once a user is onto that escape velocity of third purchase, fourth purchase, and so on, you know that you have retained the user. So essentially, that is where the majority of the focus is with the user. How do we get the product right to cater to a mix of users? How do we ensure he basically gets the right trust on the platform once he is into, and what kind of journeys does a user go through, right? What kind of product loops? How do we unfold the product to him so that essentially, as he goes through the product, he's unpeeling the right layer of the onion, and that basically leads to a retention. That is where the crux essentially is for all of us at Adam.
Sure. Thanks, Harish. It was quite an in-depth, insight into understanding your consumers. So, what's your take? The onus is on you right now. Everybody has basically passed the bait to you. So we are looking forward to your understanding and your take on how these consumers are basically evolving in India.
My take, as correctly pointed out by both Ravish and Shivanandan, is that retention plays a key role. And as the market is progressing, as the industry is progressing, we are observing that players are becoming more serious, more mature, and we are seeing that maturity progress over time. So that is correctly there. As Harish also correctly pointed out, it's not easy to acquire a player for, let's say, a fantasy and then switch him over to Rummy or poker. The games are very different. People who are playing them are very different. In a lighter context, I would say that A person coming from South India probably likes to eat idli and dosa, and if you serve an aloo paratha, probably will not be very happy every day. Once in a while, it's good. But similarly is the case with games. A person who is designed or who gets entertained while playing fantasy will not probably get entertained while playing Rummy. And similarly, vice versa, a person who's getting entertained while playing Rummy might not get entertained by playing fantasy. So that's my short and crisp take on it.
Great. So first of all, I'll stay with you here, right? So there are some, couple of points that ZEE5 monitor really, focuses on. One is obviously the age divide, right? So it says that, in the growing age groups, right, the tendency to play online games is lesser, right? That's one. And secondly, there's another point about the male-female ratio divide where we are seeing a similar amount of uptake from both male and female players, right? But still, since you have both multiplayer games as well as singulars like as Harish and Shivanand mentioned about Rummy, poker, and all that. So, what's your take on how have you observed consumers on these 2 points across your gaming titles?
Good question. So, see, to answer this question, what we should do is probably study the history of gaming a little bit. Probably our generation, the generation that was born in 1990s or probably 85s, they were brought up by playing games like be it on handheld devices, consoles, or video games that were connected to TV. We were very much addicted to, or I would say gaming was there in our lifestyle, especially gaming with consoles or on different devices. Probably that was not the case with the generation earlier. My father probably did not have that liberty or luxury to play a video game. So that is where it translates to that the generation that is in the 30s today, they are habituated in playing online games. They are more technical savvy. They get those devices, they have those devices, they can download an app versus compared to other or older audience where it is slightly more difficult for them to get accustomed to or get habituated to downloading a new game and trying it out. So the age divide, as we see, if you see a fantasy as a game, right, you'll observe that fantasy is a new game. It involves complexity of making teams, selecting players, complexity of managing your credits. You have awarded with limited credits. How do you use that and make your team? So you'll see that younger audience, probably males 18 to 25 or at max 30, will enjoy playing fantasy. Whereas in Rummy, the audience who enjoys Rummy starts from the age of 25. So 25 to typically 35 or 40 years males is what Rummy players typically look like. When it comes to male-female divide, the games that are being offered by Games 24/7 are typically in the range of typically for our real money games, and they attract male audiences more. But as you correctly mentioned, that female audiences are also picking up and are playing a lot of online games. That's completely true. As I mentioned, kind of content you have for the audience to consume differs, and the kind of content which is liked by different audiences differs. For example, let's take another example of, let's say, PUBG or Free Fire. That is liked by audiences like young children, right? They like play first-person shooting games with many real money online players and so on. Whereas if you talk about my wife, she would probably like playing Candy Crush or bottle soda. So more with bright colors and she just wants to get entertained, just feel relaxed. So that is the audience or content that she wants to consume. So the kind of content that everyone wants to consume is different. The kind of games that everyone will consume again will vary. But yes, there is a definite uptake in the number of online games that people are playing.
Great. Thanks, Vachal. On this, staying on this male-female ratio divide and also the age gap, right? I would really want to come to Harish here, right? Harish, we are talking about consumers of the fantasy games as well as poker, I mean all of the online games. One pertinent point that the ZEE5 Intelligence Monitor finds out is that the metro and non-metro divide among these players. So the monitor says that non-metro players have a higher frequency of playing games online compared to the metro-based players. What's your take in this, and how do you see this trend among your consumers across your gaming titles?
So it's actually true. We have a fair bit of a non-metro playing base, on all our brands, uh, and I think one of the key reasons driving Bharat to do this is the aspiration index itself. Right? There is this whole element of the fact that they can come to a real money platform and win big. That is a big major attraction for majority. And then when you start try to figure out who are these users, essentially prize winners as we call them. It's like a prize seekers. They all essentially are like यार मैं एक बार वो जैकपॉट जीत जाऊं, तो एक वो टेंडेंसी है. बट देन देयर इज अ सेट ऑफ यूजर्स हु कम एंड से कि आई फील रियली हाई because I can meet like-minded people, play with them, and apply my knowledge of, let's say, a fantasy. Or I have been playing Rummy and I know how to get the cards speak to my, right? They speak better to me than maybe with the other set of guys. And essentially, this behavior is no different than what TikTok or what YouTube's, etc., or Instagram of the world are changing, right? They essentially provided an outlet to the set of influencers, or let's say a hero in every niche and corner of India. That is what platforms like this is doing. So essentially now with the advent of this cheaper data usage, or with the advent of smartphones which are fairly affordable, it's in hand of everyone, right? And then as a result, these users are no more casted. They have essentially the entire world in their hands to explore. And this is what is happening with any gaming platform. They are no more tied down. They are like, oh, I saw, let's say, an ad talking about this, and they were talking about winning big, and it is talking about competition, and it had fancy imagery of all nice cricketers to it, and that is the aspiration which basically makes them click and explore, right? The fact still remains that yes, they come and play. The challenge still remains monetization, right? What is the type of monetization can we drive through them? So, okay, out of if 100 users are playing, how many actually are the real money gamers, or how many actually do in-app purchases? That is yet to be seen. I think it is evolving in that sense. Essentially, when you think from these users' perspective, they are asking for very simple things, right? For example, we tried experiments where we said कि यार थोड़ा सा data को ना graphical कर देते हैं, अच्छा कर देते हैं, which looks very corporatish to us. But when we ask for users, they are like, ये तुमने क्या कर दिया? What have you guys done? We can't understand. We can't make any sense. Give us tables, right? So essentially, what these users are asking, very simplified UI UX experience. इनको कुछ fancy नहीं चाहिए, right? आप simple UI UX दे दो, clutter thoda kam rakho, they are okay. So there is a product solutioning which they are asking for. When you think from their perspective, they essentially are not really very deep pocketed. So what kind of values offers can we give them? That plays a bigger role. I mean, yes, everyone likes कि किसको discount अच्छा नहीं लगता है, right? But they essentially would come and say, अच्छा discount क्या है, अच्छा offer क्या है? And अगर आपको offer नहीं दिखेगा, तो they will go and create new accounts, right? Those are the type of behaviors we see. So value and the offers, etc., makes a big difference to life of these guys. And I mean, I talk about trust. I talked about it earlier also. That's a big element for them. Can I deposit money? Can I withdraw it easily? More than anything, the two other factors which we realized after speaking with these users, which basically ticks them, is localization of content. So am I offering content in native languages? Right? And then, for example, there are a set of users who would say, give us a content in Hindi, or give us a content in Tamil, or for that matter, Malayalam, which we don't have on our platform. Users are asking for that, right? So there is an element of content, how they are consuming and in which language they are consuming. Also now with some of, so for example, with Gamesy, we have multiple games, right? And then, and if you see some of the trends, right? For example, Ludo or Teen Pati, these have become fairly big in terms of board games. What is the Indianization of the content? How I can bring the local strong games which have been played behind closed doors or within our families, etc. Right? They're asking for stuff like that. I think doing all of this will bring a lot of these users, engage them essentially, and give them a strong value to go and become a cash players essentially. But these are some of the things which we have observed by by basically interfacing, talking to them, and seeing their behavior on our platform.
Great. Thanks, Rish. It's interesting that you mentioned about the characteristics. I would want to come to Rajiv here. Rajiv, I would want to draw a parallel here, and I can see a definite parallel in OTT users, OTT consumers, as well as gaming consumers. We're talking about localized content. We are talking about the characteristics and how they engage with it. And there is one finding in the survey where where ZEE5 mentions that the consumers' uptake of gaming increased in the pandemic period, which kind of was true for OTT as well. We have seen that, right? How do you see these parallels happening? In the consumer sets that you have along with the gaming.
One, I think you use the right word parallel, and I think Vatsal hinted to that when he went back to the history of gaming and to go back a few decades. He went all the way to his dad. And then he said, our generation, I don't know which generation.
And Rajiv, he made both of us look a little old.
I know. I felt that same, Shiva, but since we're on the same panel, we like to be on the same age group. We're assuming we're the same age. See, if you see the progression of television, I'm trying to answer your question, Satyajit, especially when it comes to being a parallel of gaming and television content. See, one common factor between the two is the viewer is the same. It's not that we have an isolated viewer. Right. It's not that people only watch content and only do gaming. They're mutually exclusive. They're the same people. And look at their journey and how the journey has been of content itself in India. Now, ZEE runs, we have about 50 plus channels. We operate in 12 languages. We have in Hindi, Tamil, Bangla, Malayalam, Bhojpuri, Punjabi, Uriya, of course, English and Hindi, and many more, Marathi. But that wasn't the case to begin with, right? To begin with, it was largely Hindi, then perhaps English, and then other language got added. So I'm saying what also Harish mentioned about regional personalization. Again, personalization, of course, much more a difficult factor in gaming, but of course, regionalization is much more a very phenomena. You have to contextualize content sometime. And I think television industry by far today, if you see, has grown because of what it realized in the sense of potential of the regional market. Of course, we use regional protagonists, regional stories, and regional language as a glue. I'm sure the gaming industry will have a few other factors when it comes to regional appeal. But the journey has been very similar. There was a dominance of metros for television industry also to begin with, especially when it came to monetization. Now that also is getting broader to regional markets, and I think in the longer period it would be rural markets. And I'm quite sure the gaming industry, and again the survey is very, very remarkable in that sense to suggest how non-metros, perhaps a non-metro user is perhaps even a higher premium user for a longer period point of time. The frequency of his coming on the platform, the time spent that he's giving, and I'm not making a comment about the life that a metro consumer enjoys versus non-metro, but it's a matter of fact that some people have more time on their hand. If you take youth, of course, youth has more time on their hand than maybe Shiva and I will have to go onto many platforms, including content platforms. But there is a set of audience which has a higher time spent availability. And today, ZEE5, largely the survey is a reflection of the youth of India, because the core of ZEE5 is between 20 to 35. Of course, non-metro is very dominant because of the 12 language content we offer. It's a fair divide between female and male. So it's a very fair representation of where the country today is from a content point of view and also from a gaming point of view. And the answer is very clear that the deeper you go into India, the longer advantage that you give. And again, I think Harish mentioned to this about the internet advantage, which is available today. And I'm going to use a finding of a different survey we were doing for EdTech industry. And very often people make a mistake between affordability and aspiration. People consume somebody not being able to afford as a reflection of his or her aspiration. And I think gaming industry will be kind of also a great example of saying that's not the fact. The aspiration is always there. It's the affordability which has been the factor. It's not that my aspiration or my cousin's aspiration in Bhilai or Bhopal or Thiruvananthapuram is different. Our aspirations are very similar. We are very similar people. Of course, yes, I enjoy maybe a paratha more than my friends in down south. They enjoy idli more. But aspirations when it comes to are very similar. It's the affordability which was a factor. And I think internet, and I think this is larger comment, and our entire study is largely therefore of internet industry or digital industries. how they have democratized this, how they have broken the barrier of affordability and have allowed access. And I think that's the fantastic part of the industry of e-gaming, that the access is as democratic as it can be, right? Aspiration was always there, the access got available, and media like ours have taken the message forward because they're already consuming our content, therefore they're all aware of these products as well. So I think we are in a very early stages of what we may just see is revolutionary when it comes to, and if you take an example of China also, it's a very similar trend in China as well. The number of people who are consuming are very different to where they started from. And so to answer your question, very strong parallel between content and gaming, very, very strong parallel. The advantage that gaming has is that gaming can learn all the 30 years of learnings that television industry took. Perhaps gaming industry will do that in 3 years.
Great, great. Thanks, Rajiv. So I really want to connect this question, and since we are talking about content, since we're talking about media, I really want to come to Shiva here. Shiva, the one thing that media helps any brand is to promote its brand message and to in advertising. One point that the survey here mentions is that the propensity of consumers, right, interacting with one game, right, it increases massively once the ad is, once they see the ad of the game, on any of the relevant platforms, be it online or be it TV or, be it OTT. How do you see this? In your experience, have you seen, among your consumers, how the propensity grows? Are the downloads increasing? Are the engagement increasing? What are the kind of additions that, advertising helps to gaming platforms?
Yeah. So as I started, our biggest or the biggest revenue earner and our strength has always been poker. Unfortunately, poker operates in an environment where ad avenues or advertising avenues, we are extremely starved because Facebook and Google does not allow. So the team has to be extremely, extremely innovative in terms of reaching out to consumers, plus trying to be innovative in terms of how do I still use Google platforms or Facebook platforms through surrogate, right? And so from that aspect, we have, whenever we did try a little bit of mass kind of campaigns, we did see huge surge on the mouth of the funnel improving. But as I said, the niche is very, right? The second challenge which we have, which I keep telling the team also, poker, unlike the other games, is 99.5% maybe dominated by men. And I'm new to the industry. It's been 1.5 years into the industry. And I have been posing this question. I don't get the answer. I believe that we need to attract more women to poker. We need to make poker a more women-friendly game, or I don't know how to do it, but or get women more, because I believe that is going to accelerate the adoption of poker in India, which is now happening through the universities actually. And unfortunately, pandemic brought a halt to all hostel goers, and that reduced the initiation of poker in the first year of the college. What I have kept hearing is the campuses, especially the engineering and the MBA campuses, are the greatest places where students of India get initiated to poker, because their aspiration is post that to go US, and poker is a great icebreaker when you go to US or Europe, because that's an international game, right? So these are the two challenges for us. If to answer to your question, do we see an uptick in whenever we advertise using the so-called mass media, right? We do get. But the challenge is the funnel increases, but it doesn't move to the next stages. So invariantly, we come back to the boardroom and say, was it an ROI positive? Was it, right? How do I make it ROI positive is my question to them, because I believe that's one channel which we need to explore more and more, whether it is an OTT platform like ZEE5 or anybody else, right? Unfortunately, we don't get that filtered approach where the ROI or ROS can get justified, especially for poker. I'm talking purely from poker. If it is multi-gaming platform, which is Adda.Games for us, I think it will definitely act as a great channel. And that's where my friends here, Harish and Vatsal, would be able to tell you, because they play a large role. Rummy doesn't have that restriction on advertising. Fantasy does not have that restriction, right? The other challenge what we have, which we face, which all three of us would be facing, is the non-availability on 90% of accessed platform, which is the Google App Store. So trust gets built there actually. When you have to go through a page, when a user has to go through a page instead of a Play Store, the trust gets broken there. There are a lot of efforts which goes from our end to trying to increase that or trying to overcome that. Now in the mass media segment also, that the moment we advertise, the backlash on our call center which we get is, you are not available on Play Store. Who are you? Right? Now that also again comes back, and my team in the boardroom will say that, oh, this load is increasing, right? That's the chicken and egg situation where we are faced, where we are from a mass media, right? If Rajiv and his team could tell us that, probably these are the guys whom we should target, right?
Yes.
Or is there a way to reach out to them? That's going to be a solution, right? The third aspect of, I'm just going back to the previous discussion which we had, pandemic did lead us to a scenario where we started seeing uptick in users coming from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. For poker, when we started looking at it, it's a great sign, and this we are able to look at it and marry it with two things. One, the pandemic pushed back a lot of our professionals who used to play 1 or 2 hours in a day back to their hometowns, and hometowns had a better offline environment. They were not so restricted like the cities. And today we see our growth pockets emerging from the eastern part of the country, the West Bengals, Northeast, where slowly people are. So when we spoke to these consumers, we realized that, some of the town members who go there, they have started introducing it. So these markets have become very important for us. Now, if tier 2, tier 3 as a market we have to look at, even for poker, it has become very, very important. Last week, one of our winner of, we had an iPhone-led campaign from a, leaderboard perspective, was from Asansol. And he was not even 12th pass. Right? So poker as a game and then winning from these kind of towns is definitely heartening.
Right. So, this brings me to Vatsal here. Vatsal, you have multiplayer games as well as fantasy, a leading fantasy platform. How do you see advertising, especially on, digital and OTT platforms, helping you in your acquisition of, newer users and retaining users as well?
Yeah. So these platforms play a very important role when it comes to advertising or promoting our games. As Shivanandan rightly said, the games are not available on Play Store. Not available on Play Store, it gives a lot of trust deficit when a person has to go to a landing page and then download the app. What OTT platforms helps us do is they already have a trust built in with the user. When they are watching any show on ZEE5 or in Hindi or in their regional language, the trust is already there. And when an ad comes on these platforms, it might not help us directly in user downloading the apps, but what it helps us in is building the trust. That trust building, since it's very important, as pointed out by both Harish and Shivanandan, it helps us there. This is a key thing to keep in our media mix.
Right.
The interesting thing, Satrajit, here is, and I think Shiva also mentioned, Vatsal is saying the same thing. Of course, Shiva mentioned about females and Vatsal is talking about trust. And I think the biggest advantage that platform like not just ZEE5 but others could also offer is the protagonist, and how one can use protagonists who are such celebrity status in their regional markets. Especially when it comes to women protagonists, because we have lots of leading women protagonists from every market, be it in Kerala, be it in Bangla, be it in Marathi. And not many of the gaming players have yet utilized that as a route to reach out or influence and gain more trust. So there are options available on platforms like ZEE5, which are much beyond the obvious, FCT and impression and spots.
Correct. I was actually coming to you, Rajiv, and had a larger question about how ZEE5 is a preferred platform, and ZEE5 has been a preferred platform for a lot of brands, right? So here, if we speak about e-gaming specifically, and look at a larger umbrella of all the kinds of online games that we have, how do you see ZEE5 as a platform, helping our friends out here in basically we're taking the word out, and which ultimately results in
Right.
acquisition.
I think for Satyajit, first and foremost is what we're trying to do now is basically we're trying to gauge which industry really are finding favor with our audience. And I think the reason we're doing the discussion is because gaming as industry is finding favor with our audience. Our audience is a filtered audience, to use a reference of funnel, my friend said. So it's already a filtered audience, come from the broad base of 900 million TV consumers to, let's say, 90 million here. And it's already funneled to using mobile as a first surface, number one. Second, they are predisposed to kind of making app purchases, installs, so their habits, etc., are much more this thing. We also can, track their kind of habits and their, through Infonomics, other data of what they're consuming, what, other, like-to-like appographic data gives us what they're doing and how they're spending the time, money, and resources otherwise. So we have a lot of actionable insights already available to us. We have a flavor of their kind of current aspirations available to us. And then I think access from any demographic point of view, any geography point of view, any cohort point of view is also widely available to most of the players. And like I was saying earlier, I think to answer and fulfill, if I were to do, is on the trust and women clearly are protagonist, and these have falling, some beating even the film stars, is much higher because the frequency of exposure of a TV star to an audience is daily. I still don't think marketers have fully leveraged TV personalities as widely as perhaps they use the 10, 12, famous personalities on the silver screen. But I believe from a trust, of course, that gets you popularity, but to score on the trust, I think the TV personalities have much deeper relationship with the audiences, and I think it's still widely underutilized.
Great. So as we come towards the end of this, session today, I'm really, intrigued to come to all my panelists here and, really do a quick round kind of a thing where we quickly bring out some bullet points about how the future looks like when it comes to the gaming industry, or the e-gaming industry to be precise, in India. And I would want to start with Harish first. Harish, what's the way of growth for us from here and now onwards?
I think multiple people have talked, and you yourself started this conversation, how bright the future looks, right? And then I think starting with your spiel and also a couple of studies, the way they came out in this sector, let it be BCG or Lookumai, etc., the kind of reporting even which has come out, that tells you that, this sector is definitely very, very interesting. If you see some of the data from this report, in fact, what I was very surprised to read was that gaming as a segment grew faster than OTT during pandemic. What I was surprised to see was the CAGR of gaming is actually on a faster growth track than OTT. In fact, compared to some of the industries, like when you look at from media point of view, gaming is already number 3rd or 4th in terms of consumption, in terms of media. So that tells, and this is with India just being at 1% of entire global gaming, right? And then understanding that, all the major indicators in terms of penetration, in terms of adoption, in terms of revenue uplift, still are in a very, very nascent stage. So I think we are looking at a very exciting future where we will see a faster adoption. We will also see a lot of new formats, right? Rise of social gaming is on rise, and with pandemic, this need to be in constant touch with each other when you're not really on a physical space, right? That has also increased. So I think we'll see a definite boom in line with what we are seeing already. We've seen over the last 2 years. It will continue to grow exponentially, continue to adopt new formats. I think we'll see a lot of disruption, especially in the space of personalization, space of retention, how ML and AI could be used to drive better user metrics there, and then lastly, how the regionalization of the content, etc., would happen. I think it's a fast train. We're just like lucky to be here, and it's full of learning for people like me for sure.
Great, thanks, Harish. Shiva, would really want to hear your thoughts on what are the trends that are really driving the future for this industry.
I think we have just scratched the tip of the iceberg as far as gaming, online gaming itself is concerned, plus RMG itself, right? So RMG becomes a subset of the overall online gaming, if you were to look at it. So globally, gaming as an industry is far bigger than, or is bigger than cumulatively put together music, media, television, Hollywood, right? Movies, everything. So in India, probably from a pure consumption, number of people consuming it is far bigger than all these three put together. In terms of revenue, we have a little long way to catch up, right? Because economic value of user per se, when I look at overall gaming is far lower when it comes to the Indian consumers, right? Having said that, the marriage between content and gaming is, I guess, somebody is going to figure it out. When I say content, it is all encompassing, right? It is not just gaming content, or it's not just the content which is consumed from one way, right? While I would like to say television, OTT gives a one-way content consumption, while gaming more or less has a lot of two-way consumption, which happens either collectively or even individually, right? When I do some action, somebody else has to do an action, right? And that's how the game is. I think it's a matter of time when these two get married, right? And how that is going to change the economy, or how that's going to take away the wallet share of the consumer, I'm not in a position to answer to that question. I don't have that visibility, but that's going to happen very soon, right? So imagine a situation where in an OTT there is a card game going. Can there be a live interaction, like for us to interact and get a player there to play live? I don't know. It's a matter of time, I guess, somebody to solve that issue, right? And that's going to actually drive the overall industry cumulatively. That's what I would like to believe, right? Yeah.
Great, thanks, Shiva. Vatsal, I would come to you. What's your take on how do you see the future growing for this industry?
I mean, both Harish and Chandan have already covered a lot of things. So I'd just like to add that e-commerce back in 2009 was, and probably 2010, gaming is where e-commerce was at that point in time. So probably a long way to go. Content marrying, and in fact, I would say the industry is going to evolve beyond our imaginations. So it's just not that a player will generate content and will distribute the content. That's just not going to be there. I believe that users are going to generate content for themselves and for the users to consume, and the players out there will just act as mere platforms and will support with the technology that they have. So it's just beyond imagination that how big this is going to be. Let's wait and watch.
Great. On that note, I really want to come to Rajiv here. Rajiv, we have heard about all our experts saying about, the way content is growing, right? You have seen both the sides. What's your take on how gaming can evolve?
Well, before, ZEE, I used to work for another studio company which produced big Bollywood movies, and I saw all the big movies turning into games, very popular games. But obviously that's again, like I said, in India, the fascination first goes to the big films and silver screen content and those kind of characters. I think, continuing on what Vatsal said, I think the only thing which can constrain the growth of this industry is imagination. I think the market is ready, is fertile, is growing. The appetite is huge. Time availability is also at play. And I don't think affordability is an issue anymore. It's only the imagination which can constrain this industry as alone. But what surprises me more today, because I've been outside media industry for 4 years and I come back after 4 years, is what has surprised me today is that nobody's able to kind of lock the two industries together, which is media/content and gaming. To me, they have a natural symbiotic relationship, and I'm sure very soon someone will unlock this value by combining the two, because the opportunities that one can see of both these streams working and living together and flourishing together, I think is the brightest opportunity is what I see.
Great. Thanks, Rajiv, and thank you, all my panelists here. I think, we have come to the end of this discussion, but we have, as, Shiva mentioned, we have just really scratched the surface, and we still don't know how the consumers are going to evolve in the near future. Having said that, all the trends that we discussed today is really seen to be how they unravel themselves and how the future really grows in this particular sector. On that note, it's bye from all of us here. Take care and stay tuned to ET Branding.